Hello and welcome astrologer. My name is Maggie Rose Cunningham, and today we are going to be looking at the implications of the movements of the planets through the runic wheel for this coming lunar cycle starting on the 23rd of August. And I've had so much fun putting this session together for you, and I blame Odin. So Odin's chariot, which is the equivalent of Mercury, has spent an inordinate amount of time in the realm of the Thurisaz rune because he went on retreat, which basically meant he went into retrograde motion and he went back into Thurisaz. He spent ages in there and then he went forward into Thurisaz again. And I always think that there's a sort of a renewal process. We can get a lot of disruption from those retreat energies. I think particularly Odin's chariot, but some of the other planets as well. We've had lots of retreat energy and we still have some planets in retreat that we're going to look at. But Odin has come out of retreat and he's moved out of Thurisaz. And I went away. I've been away from home for about 3 weeks. And when I went away, I did not, for the first time in I don't know how long, I didn't pack my rune set and I didn't pack all of my materials to make this live view. And what that meant was that 2 weeks ago, I went to the bookshop that I went to when I found my first ever rune set. It was a long time ago now. It's over 30 years ago now. And it's still a bookshop. It's not the same company, but it's still a bookshop. And I just thought, well, I'll do a little pilgrimage there. And I knew I didn't have my runes at that time. It's a totally normal standard bookshop. It's not a magical bookshop. And lo and behold, when I went in the very front section, they had one set of runes. And they were also very reasonably priced. And they're not the type of runes that I normally like to get. The runes that I've invested in or made myself essentially have either been ones that I've put a lot of energy into, or they've been made by somebody that I know really well who's put a lot of energy in. And they're not that. They're little glass runes, little blue glass runes. That's the Dargaz rune there for you. But I've had so much fun playing with them. It felt like a little bit of a gift from the universe. So we're going to be playing with that rune set. Because I didn't have all of my charts and all of the things that I provide for you on Sunna's Star Wheel or my book that's got all of my astrological movements in, I was like, well, I've got some runes that I can make a rune circle with for the planetary movements. And then I went digging in my mum's old button collection. I don't know about you. Do you have a mum who has a button collection of all of the buttons that have ever happened over time? And so I've got buttons. So we're going to be playing with the buttons. I'm going to introduce you to the buttons to start with before I start to show you the planetary movements. So let me just find my screen share. It's beautiful and bright here today, which is lovely, but it does mean that it's a little bit difficult to see what's happening on my screen here. But here we go. So the northern planets, let's say the northern planets as seen via buttons, if they were buttons, what would they look like? So we have got our button for Sunna's Chariot, which is, I've got a little here. So my buttons, if I can sort of put that into the screen there, you can see that what the actual buttons look like. But I've got some sort of rendered pictures of them for you here so that you can see them easily so that when you get to the photographs, you know what they look like. So we've got Sunna's Chariot, which is the sun. Now the sun and the moon as well, Mani's Chariot, are attested to within the literature. So we know that the sun and the moon were called Sunna's Chariot and Mani's Chariot. We also have the artifact of the Trundholm Sun Chariot, various things that help us to know that the sun and the moon at least were referred to as chariots and were ascribed to Sunna and Mani. Now, the rest of the planetary ascriptions that I work with are founded on the work of Nigel Pennick. I have made a few tweets myself over the number of years that I've been working with runic astrology, but they're founded on the work of Nigel Pennick. So we have got Odin's Chariot, which is the equivalent of Mercury. It's a tiny little blue button. He's very agile because he's moving about all of the time. Now, Frigg, his wife, his consort, his queen, she's got an enormous button. She wanted this sort of peacocky, iridescent button there, you can see. And so her button is significantly larger than Odin's. Odin seems to be okay with that, and she's okay with that. Slightly different to move around on my board. So if anyone has a peacock button, let me know. We might do this again in future. We've got Frigg's Chariot. So Frigg is the Old Norse name for Frigg, and obviously we are using the Norse names of the gods for the purposes of this of runic astrology. Some people call her Frigga, which is an anglicized version, a modern anglicized version of Frigg. It's not what Frigga is not what the Anglo-Saxons, the old English would have called her. They were more likely to have called her Free or Frio or Freya. Frigga is often what she's called, but you can use either. Then we have Tyr's chariot. So this is the equivalent of Mars. So as you would expect with the red planet, we've got our red button here. And if you think about the chariots, it's because the planets move. So sometimes they're referred to as the wanderers. So they move across. So the idea is that the energies of the planet are being directed or guided by a deity, which can be quite helpful for those of us who have worked with Mercury, Venus, Mars, the Roman deities, and have worked with planetary energies for a long period of time, is that it's like the energy of the planet is still there, but the northern deity is guiding the energy. So when you feel into the planets from within a northern tradition perspective, they do feel different. The energies do feel different. They're not entirely, by any means, similar to the qualities of Mars. So, for example, Tyr is a god of war, similar to Mars, but he's also a god of sacrifice, of nobility, of truth, of the guiding star. He has a lot more poise about him, a god of justice. So there's a real balance within him that Mars doesn't always exhibit. And so when we feel into the energies of the planets, they will have that, let's call it like a shared resonance, because they're all the same celestial bodies that we're working with. But the system that we're working in will mean that we receive those energies in different ways. And then we have Thor's chariot. Now, Thor, if I'd managed to find a perfect button, it probably would have been a deep green button, because he's known as the protector of Midgard, the protector of our realm of the Earth. He's got a very Jupiterian feel there. So his planet is Jupiter, but he liked the 4 gold little bits there. So he was okay with that. But if I had a deep green button, I would probably have gone with that for him. Then we have Loki's chariot, which is Saturn. So some of the ways in which, like Nigel Pennick, who did most of these associations, I think would have worked with this, was feeling into the qualities of the planet and which deities were most obviously associated with them. But there's also the days of the week for us to bear in mind that have planetary associations, and obviously our English days of the week are named after the northern deities. But Saturday is not that Saturn, it's not Loki. And some people say, oh, we can work with Saturday as being Loki's day, but the linguistic and textual references don't really support that. However, I have found that Loki's chariot resonates brilliantly with the Saturnine energy, but in a slightly different way. So he is a deity of freedom, of, breaking all of the promises, doing all of things, and of constraint, of forcing the course of Ragnarok, which has been predicted, for example. So sometimes he represents the hand of fate, thwarting the gods who are trying to do something different. And sometimes he represents the force that separates us and allows us to break free of constraints. If you think about the rings of Saturn, it's like the binding of Loki, which is one of the myths as well. So you can see how we might have a starting place. If you already know about the energy of Saturn, then you can start from that place, but we do need to understand the myths and the legends associated with these deities, and to have done our own personal work with them if we want to get them the most that we can out of runic astrology. Then we have Ud's chariot. So this is Uranus. So Ud is one of the fates, the Nornir, and she's got a little button. They really liked this button here. So it's got a little tree pattern on it, like the rings of a tree, like the tree of life, like Yggdrasil, itself in there. So she is a representative in many ways. I think about this as being the hand of fate, the hand of necessity, sort of pushing forward change. That's what comes through with the chariot. Then we have Aegir's chariot. So Aegir is a god of the deep sea. Neptune we have as well, but again, his myths, his legends are very, very different. And there's this real sense with Aegir of our relationship with the dream world and the other world. If you have your birth chart done, which is obviously where the planets were at the time that you were born, your Aegir's chariot rune would tell you a lot about how you relate to the other worlds and to the dream world, but similar to Neptune, but their myths are a bit different. So it's absolutely worthwhile, if you want to go deeply into runic astrology, creating relationships with all of these deities to support you in that. And then we have Hela's chariot. So Hela's chariot is Pluto. She's got very pretty little button that she wanted here. It's got a blue rim. Hold on, there we go. You can see that's got a little blue rim and it's sort of the metal interior. And Hela is very protective of her realm. She looks after the realm of the dead. And it is said to have these very high walls and this big river that runs all the way around it. So it's a discrete realm. It's a very large realm, but it's a very discrete realm. Hela is quite different to Pluto, quite different to some of the other sort of underworld deities. So we can think about Hela as helping us to manage our relationship with our ancestors, to do past life work for ourselves, to do ancestral healing work, and a wonderful deity to work with. So as I have said, all of these associations, the work that I started with Nigel Pennick's work. So my work is based on Nigel Pennick's work, and then I've brought in some other things as well, which some of the things that I'm looking at, like the halves and the North Node and South Node work, I don't bring into these lives, but I've been working on runic astrology for a long period of time. So those of you who are with me on Birth Rune Soul Journey will know how deep we can get with this work. So that's just a little overview of the northern planets, if they were buttons, because that's what we're going to be working with. What you're going to need to do if you want to work with me and to do the same sort of thing as me today is you're going to need to have a rune set. This is the Elder Futhark rune set, and you're going to create a lovely circle like this. You can also, if you want to use the templates that I have normally been using, you can get those from Sunna's Star Wheel, and all of the planetary movements and their dates are also in Sunna's Star Wheel and the Sunna's Star Wheel membership. It's a monthly membership that you can join. You can absolutely do that. But if you have your Elder Futhark rune set, then you can make your circle like this. I'm going to show you how to make the circle. So it's sort of the easiest way that you can do it. And this is where the blue runes are absolutely beautiful, but they're not so easy for you at home to see them on the screen that I've created. So my apologies for that. But this is essentially the ecliptic, which is the perceived motion of the planets around the Earth. Obviously, they don't revolve around the Earth, so it's the perceived way in which they go around the Earth in a big circle. And the zodiac uses the same line, essentially the same circle, but we arrange the runes around it. So what you want to do is you're going to get your runes and you're going to start by placing your 4 main marker runes. You have the Yera rune, which looks like that, up at the top, which represents the space of the winter solstice. You have your Dargaz rune down at the bottom, which is the southern bit of your circle, representing the summer solstice. And then we have the Bacano rune and the Kenaz rune, representing the equinoxes. Obviously, if you're in the southern hemisphere, you have to sort of do a bit of switcheroo around that, but this is from the northern hemisphere. So if you put your Bacano rune over on the right-hand side and your Kenaz rune on the left-hand side, and your Yera rune and your Dargaz runes, you can start to create your circle. So then you bring in the next rune. So you're going to start with from Dargaz. So we end our rune circle with Dargaz when we're doing runic astrology. Sometimes for other purposes, Dargaz and Athala are reversed, but we use Dargaz when we're doing the astrological wheel. And we arrange Feyu, Urus, Thurisas, Ansuz, Raidho, nice and evenly in our circle. And then we just go around and we do the same. We add the next going up to Yera. And then we add our next quarter in, and then we add our final quarter in, so you get a nice circle. So you can do that with your rune set to get us started so that then we're ready to start our reading. Now, one of the reasons that I do really like to work this way is because it's so tactile. And if you are already a rune reader, you can get a huge amount from doing your reading of the planetary movements, saying how are these resonating in a way that is much harder if you're doing all sort of theoretically in your head or on the screen. The northern peoples had a huge amount of trust and faith in the knowing of the body. Certainly when I think about the seer, and when I do work with people on developing the seer cell, our connection with our body and our kinesthetic knowing, incredibly important. So we're going to look at the planets that aren't moving in this cycle. So say, like, where do they start? So we're going to start with our outliers, because those further away planets move very, very slowly. Hela's chariot up here in the Perthrow rune only moves every 9 years, and we're about at the halfway point where she is in Perthrow right now, and it's a real karmic release. And there's a lot of past life energy available to us, a huge amount of healing available to us, but there's also a lot of flotsam and jetsam, you might call it, sort of karmic debris floating up from the collective consciousness, because these outer planets very much represent collective energies, they're generational energies. So the rune that your Hela's chariot was in when you were born represents an energy that's important to you, but also for everyone who was born within that 9-year period. Your other runes talk to you about how you might iterate that, but it supports your relationship with the ancestors, with the dead. It's a great access point for you for past life healing. So it's a great rune to know. So you can know what your personal birth rune is for Hela's chariot. And you can also say, okay, well, what does the Perthro rune, this rune of mystery, of sensuality, of laughter, of change in many ways. Often people refer to it as the flow of weird itself. They sort of see it as a pot that the waters of weird are flowing from. And as the flooding of all of the waters that are rising up and flooding the worlds. So it can be experienced as a lovely rune, play and laughter and joy and happiness, but also as, oh, we appear to be experiencing some collective flooding right now, be a bit overwhelming at times. All of the runes have positive and negative aspects to them, which we seek to master and understand. The shadow and the light operating, together. It's not good and evil. Just to be really, really clear, there are maybe sort of shadow sides and initiatory paths that take place through the shadow, as well as initiatory paths that take place in the light and in the joy. So each rune has those within them. So that's Hela's chariot in Perthro. We have Aegir in Bacano, and there are actually 2 runes in Aegir that are sort of non-movements, but we'll start with Aegir and Bacano. So Bacano is the rune of the divine feminine, of new beginnings. It's a great time for dream work because Bacano offers new ways of working and rebirthing through this process as well. And again, Aegir's chariot has been in Bacano for quite a substantive period of time at this point. So sometimes we can almost not feel it, because we've been in it for so long, and we have to root in it and say, what does that mean in terms of the process of the divine feminine re-manifesting in the world and birthing some of that Perthro energy? So brings some of that through. So it's a time of great change and transformation, again, at a collective level. New ideas coming through, new possibilities coming through, old dreams dying, new dreams birthing. And all of those things are happening during this time. And then we have Ud's chariot is in Ingus. So right down here in Ingus. She moved relatively recently. She moved into Ingus for a period of time last year. Then she went on retreat. She moved back into Lagus. And then she went, yes, I'm committing to Ingus right now. And what she does for us is, because she is the hand of change, the hand of fate and the hand of destiny, she sort of says the time of possibility, as in the undercurrents of possibility for us collectively, has passed. The waters of Lagus, which we were in for a long period of time, represent a time when, as a collective, humanity as a collective, we were able to influence the course of our lives in many different and varied ways. But we've sort of set the pattern now. So we have to live with whatever that pattern is and reap the consequences of that. So we're in a time of consequences now. Seeds for a new paradigm, but the seeds themselves we can't change. So in many ways, I feel as if it was that all of the things that have happened within the world, the pandemic, huge changes that were made through the millennium, for example, the birthing of technology, climate change, all of those sorts of things, those things have happened, and we can't undo them. We have to work with what's there, is essentially what we would say. So it's worth bearing in mind that when those come through, it means that if you're thinking, oh, I'm struggling with that, I'm finding that difficult, Odin Ingus is a teacher then for you. They don't just sort of go, they're going, no, you're having a bad time. They also say, come to me for help and guidance and wisdom on that. So Odin Ingus is a great place of working with the Ingus rune, which you can see on my little runes here. That Ingus rune looks like a little helix, like a DNA helix. It can also represent as a diamond shape, in case that is what it looks like on your set. And then we have Loki in Bacano. So Loki is joining Aegir in Bacano. He brings an element of mischief and laughter, which is quite helpful this time. It's that sort of, there's a lightness that he brings to this, and an ability for us to sometimes use our wily ways and to sometimes be a bit of a shapeshifter when we need to be. There is a protective energy here. I don't feel that there's a huge reading from Loki coming through for this session. I've done some in the past when we've looked at this, because Loki will be in Bacano for quite some time now as well. It is a challenging energy, because Loki always brings challenging energies. He says, where are you vulnerable? You know, where is that sort of innocent child self, the new beginning self, and what challenges does that part of you need in order to grow? But he's also teaching us ways of operating in the world which are quite different and draw quite heavily again on the divine feminine, as opposed to the divine masculine, which appears elsewhere. He's very fluid in gender and in identity, and he teaches us that change is possible. You know, that change is possible for all of us, which I think is quite important at this point. So again, once we get into Loki and Thor's chariot, we're starting to move into energies that, yes, are felt collectively, but are also about our communities, you know, our families and our communities, so the sort of smaller segments of society and how we fit within them. So Loki can bring up things that, rather than being our relationship with the global perspective, they can be about our relationships with colleagues, family, friends. And again, they can bring challenge with the Loki and Bacano, and they can bring teachings for us as well. The final rune that's not going to move through the course of this cycle is Thor's chariot in Feyu. And it's a really, really lovely energy of Thor starting out on a new cycle. He's been through Dargaz, he's come into Feyu, and he is offering new resources and new possibilities. Now, what it's worth bearing in mind is that Feyu is a very flowing energy. So when he's operating, he operates within our workplaces and in our place of purpose. It means that the resources that we have available to us can move very rapidly. So they can move towards you, and you can be like, oh, I'm attracting lots of stuff in, that's great. And they can move away from you equally as fast. So it can sometimes feel a little bit, uncontrolled, because Thor likes to have a handle on things, like literally likes to have his hammer and say, right, this is what's happening. And Feyu moves quite rapidly. Thor is incredibly reverent of this energy. He is a bringer of fertility into the worlds. But there is this sense that perhaps it's moving a bit fast for him, and he would rather have a greater force of control within that. So again, if you're somebody who works within the Northern tradition, you can be doing things like your Hammer of Thor, right? Calling the Feyu energy towards you if it feels as if it's moving too rapidly away from you. Feyu is a rune of wealth and of life force. Feyu doesn't lend itself to keeping stuff, so you have to tend and manage your wealth flows and your life force flows and work on the basis that some of them are being given out into the world. And it's about how rapidly can we draw them in and send them out. But Thor tends to that flow. It just feels at the moment, probably because of the other runes, the Bacano rune and the Throw rune in particular, that the flows of energy are going quite rapidly. So you might experience that as a bit challenging this time round and this cycle because of what's happening with the other energies. Maybe that's why he was a bit like, oh, I'm going to call on some of the Jupiterian button energy, and I'm going to have my 4 sort of solid and stable little gold rings there. It's because that desire for stability. So we might want to recognize that if our desire for stability gets too much and we try and hold the Feyu energy, it doesn't like it. We can channel it, but we can't hold onto it. So notice if you're getting the sort of heart constricting feeling of, I'm not comfortable with this, and say, okay, my job is to channel the energy. So what can I do to channel it towards me, rather than sort of holding on to it, is important there. And obviously we're going through these quite rapidly in this session because these sessions are always quite long anyway. But if this is something that, you're thinking, okay, this is a challenge for me, then absolutely, get your birth runes report done. Come and have a reading. We can go into much more detail with these things. Okay. So that's our Thor. Now, I've just have I done that a bit wrong? I've done a little bit of a slide. Hold on. Yes. So the reason that we had the extra slide is because I wanted to cover the retreat energies, and I just put a little slide in by mistake of the same picture there. So there are 3 chariots in retreat, which means that they seem to us as if they're going backwards at the moment, at the beginning of this cycle. And there is a further one that's going to go into retreat during the course of this cycle. So I wanted to mention that now. At the beginning of this cycle, we have Loki's chariot, Hela's chariot and Aegir's chariot, so Loki, Aegir, and Hela, are all in retreat. Now, what that means is if you consider that, if we think about these as being chariots, the energy of the planet is still there. It's not gone anywhere. And actually, it's not changed its direction at all. It's our perception of the direction has changed. What we might see it as being is that the guiding energy is going on retreat. With Odin, he tends to be like, yeah, I'm actually up in sticks and leaving for a period of time. So you're on your own. So you're gonna have to do a bit more guiding. And we can feel that sense that he's not giving his guidance to what's happening there. There's almost a sort of sense that the driving force's attention has moved away from the chariot, and so the energy isn't being guided by any divine guiding force, but it's still there. So the ancestral energies, some of us might experience those with Hela as being, we might get a lot of ancestral energy coming through because Hela isn't there and sort of saying, okay, I'm holding the boundaries and saying what needs to come, what's not. Some of us might experience that we can't access those energies because the boundaries are too strong, because Hela isn't there acting as a gatekeeper for us. So they can be experienced quite differently. Aegir's chariot, for some of us, it might be quite an uncontrolled experience of the dream realm. For some of us, it might be that actually there's opportunities that are available to us because Aegir isn't there, sort of paying attention to what's going on, that we might sort of be able to work within that space because the guardian deity that holds those boundaries is absent for a period of time. I've had some massive breakthroughs with my own personal dream work that have been during this retreat period with Aegir, which weren't really available to me when Aegir was there, sort of holding it and saying, well, this is the way that it normally is. So the retreat doesn't necessarily mean negative things by any means, but you can think about it as being the gatekeeper or the driving force for that energy has retreated. So it can be opportunity. And Loki's chariot, he's similar to Odin, let's say. You're going to experience the constraints and the difficulties more intensely because he's not there to save the day. Loki, for all of the things that he causes all of the trouble, he's also normally the solution to the problem. So when he's not there, we have to be our own solution. So we can experience some things as real challenges for us during this period of time, with all of these planets being in retreat. And then we have Ud's chariot, which is going in retreat down here in Ingus during that time too, which can mean a slowing of change. It can mean that things that have felt as if they're progressing quite rapidly, particularly in terms of world events, can slow down. They can also veer off course a little bit. So it's a good idea before Ud goes on retreat. If you're somebody who wants to say what's happening in the world, I want to understand what's happening in the world. She doesn't go on retreat until later in the cycle. She goes into retreat on the 6th of September is when she enters retreat. So if you want to do any work with the Nornir, probably a good idea to do it now before the 6th of September if you're saying I'm experiencing difficulties or challenges, because it might be more difficult to access that guidance once she goes into retreat. The Nornir are always present. They take their jobs very, very seriously, but they can put up some barriers to that as well. So if there's anything that you're like, what's happening now? This is a good time to be asking, because it might be a little bit more difficult to access their guiding energy later. Now it seems totally and utterly haphazard because the hand of fate is not quite on the wheel. So things can go a little bit awry during Ud's retreat time. Okay, those are our retreat energies for this cycle. So let's go back to the beginning. We've looked at the planets that aren't moving. We've looked at the retreat energies that we can expect. So we're going to go back to the beginning of the cycle now. We're going to look at the new moon in Ansuz. So here's our little moon button, and there's Ansuz there. This is obviously an art, not a science when I'm doing it this way, because I don't have any little lines of things to make sure that we're in the exact segment. So we've got our new moon in Ansuz, which is so much about inspiration and possibility. Those of you who do the wild voice sessions with me as part of Sunna Stars, you get all of your planetary movements, all of the technical bits, but you also get support for developing a very personal relationship with the runes. We're going to look at the sun in a minute, but the moon is very much about relationship and intimate personal relationship. This is why I offer the wild voice sessions for the new moon and the full moon, because it's a process of connecting with your deep seer self, with your instinctive, untamed voice. and doing that through the energy of Ansuz. So it can give new insights into the runes. So if you know the runes really well, the new moon and full moon meditations can offer you insights into the energy of the rune beyond the traditional sources. If you are new to the runes and you're like, oh God, I don't know what all of the meanings are, you don't need to worry about them, because the journaling process is an experience of the Ansuz energy with the new moon. It's not a learning process for the runes. It's a guided meditation with writing for self-expression, essentially. Brilliant for Ansuz, which is the rune of the voice, of the voice, of the flow, of the divine word that flows through Odin, but also through each of us, connecting with the breath. So I'm really looking forward to this new moon. I feel this new energy coming through, and it's also very powerful because there's a lot happening in this section, as you'll see when we get to the looking at where the other planets are. There's a lot of energy available for work with Ansuz, for expression with each other, for expression to ourselves, for that sort of in-breath. Odin has been on retreat. He's brought all of this stuff back from Thurisaz, and he's offering it to us. It's almost like he's been on a power retrieval process, and he's got more power that's available, and then he's seeking to offer that to us. So great time for writing poetry, for finding that inspiration, for reading poetry as well, for doing your journaling practice, all of those things. Fabulous for this coming cycle. So that's the new moon on the 23rd of August is our first planetary movement. So let's look at what else is happening during the course of this cycle. So we're going to look at Sunna's chariot now. So we remember I talked about Mani's chariot. So this is Sunna's chariot. We've got a little sun here, and Sunna will start out in Ansuz as well. So the new moon and the sun are both in Ansuz, which really potentizes that. And it means that not only would you have inspiration available to us through Ansuz, it's a time of healing. If you are born in the half month of Ansuz, then this is a rune that activates your soul essence. So if you're feeling very deplete, working with this rune, chanting with it, wearing it, all sorts of different exercises with it, act like a little gravitational field, pulling your energy back to you. The lunar runes tend to be about our relationship with the runes, or our relationship with other people. No, but in this case, with the runes. The sun rune is about our relationship with ourselves and the energy, the sort of essential energy of ourselves. So our sun runes can really help with that. And we're going to take a little bit of a diversion into the sun rune, a little bit of an exploration for a moment of the sun rune and the halls, because we've got quite an unusual situation this cycle, which doesn't often happen, which is that at the very, very end of this lunar cycle, the current lunar cycle that I'm in when I'm recording this for you, the sun moved into Saga's hall. So she hasn't actually moved into Saga's hall, because I'm recording this a few days before we get to the new moon. She's going to move literally the day before the new moon cycle occurs. The entire cycle will take place in Saga's hall, which normally doesn't happen. Normally there's a hall transition during the cycle. Not happening this month. We're in Saga's hall for the whole time. That will be a nice opportunity to explore the relationship between your sun rune and your zodiac sign, and how this works, for those of you who are interested in that, want to know more about your birth runes, and to sort of understand how the zodiac and the runic astrology are different to each other and how they are the same. So the sun moves through the runes, through the runic wheel, as you can see here, through our 24 runes, and it moves through the halls. And this is Saga's hall. So Saga has 3 runes in her hall, but half of the time of Ansuz doesn't belong to Saga. It belongs to Balder, who is Odin's son. So if you have a birth rune, if your birth rune is Ansuz, then you could be in Saga's hall. You could have been born in Saga's hall, or you could have been born in Balder's hall. So think about that in terms of the associations. You could be born in Leo, or you could be born in Virgo. So Saga is associated with Virgo. So you can't just say, oh, this rune is associated with this hall, because some of them, half of them, will be associated with with 2 halls. So half of Ansuz is related to Saga's hall, all of Raidho. So if your sun rune is Raidho, then you know that your sun is in Saga's hall. That's the only one that you know. And then we have Kenaz, which is again half of Kenaz is in Saga's hall. Then we have Saga, very, very strong relationship with, he goes and he visits her to find advice and guidance. And then we have Forseti's Hall afterwards. And we have Forseti's Hall afterwards. And Forseti is Balder's son. Right? So they have a very strong relationship, an intergenerational relationship, taking place here. And then we have Odin's Hall afterwards. So we've got this big sort of, all of these deities very, very strongly associated with Odin. And we have the Ansuz rune down here, which is very strongly associated with Odin, one of his runes. Rune is often associated with him, sometimes Evo as well. So it's a strong Odinic time. And we have our new moon in Ansuz as well during that period of time. But it does mean that it can take a little bit, it's a little bit complicated to work out what your sun rune sign is. When people say, oh, they might ask it, so what's your birth rune? Normally what they actually mean is what's your sun rune? It's a little bit like when people say, what's your zodiac sign? What they mean is, where was the sun in the zodiac at the time that you were born? When people ask you about your birth rune, they're normally meaning that same thing. Occasionally people say that, and they're referring to your Norn's gift, which is the hour that you're born in, which we don't cover here, but normally they're talking about your sun rune. So that's how this works. If we had an outer circle, you would be able to see all of the 12 halls of the gods, which were created by Freya Aswin. She's channeled the associations. Nigel Panic went on to adopt them. So the sun is in a rune and in a hall, and all of the planets are in a rune and a hall as well. So that's the way that works. And you'll see that what happens is the sun starts up in Ansuz, very strong connection with Saga through Odin. She is a goddess of prophecy and of history and of the expression through the word and through writing as well, which I quite like. I resonate more strongly with her than I do with Virgo. My rising sign, or my first thread as I call them, is in Raidho. So very strong patronage from Saga. And I love the fact that she's not just a historian, she's a poetess and a seeress. So she really brings in that magical side of writing. And for those of us, for the sages amongst you, who can sometimes feel like, oh, reading and writing, they can feel quite dry and they become very academic. And it brings back in that inspiration. And then we have Raidho, which does bring in the rhythm and the ritual that we might associate with Virgo as well, a little bit. But it also brings in the seeress side of Saga, because Raidho was considered to be the rune of the journey, often placed on funeral urns, so like the journey into the underworld. And then we have Kenaz, which is the rune of creativity and of creative expression, recognizing that the word is only one form of creative expression. So Saga can bring her art and her knowledge to keen as a form of deep creative expression as well. So there's lots of ways in which the runes and their relationships with the energies of the sun and the energies of the deities can offer us very, very rich insights into our magic, So she then goes on through the course of this lunar cycle. Sunna will move through Ansuz, Raidho, and finally into Kenaz as well. And then she's going to move very, very quickly afterwards into Forseti's Hall when we get to that point next lunar cycle. Okay, so we've got the sun, we've got the moon. We're going to look at Odin now. So this is the next fast-moving planet. And Odin and Frigg, when we get to her, they always hang around with the sun. They're either like just ahead or just behind. That's the way that it is. So Odin starts out in Thurisaz, which, as I mentioned, I've already mentioned this. I'm not going to go to a huge amount of it, other than to say it can be a great time of creative expression. Remembering that creative expression is not always light and fairies and things. Allow yourself the time. If there is any time to be saying, I want to spend time doing drumming, journeying, writing, expression, now is a really important time to do it, because there is such an opportunity with Odin. You might think about him as having gathered treasures from the deep earth, which he's now bringing up, but we need to claim them. So use this time for claiming those treasures. Have a little think about it. Like, do some journaling on what's come through for me, what's been challenging, what's been opportunities have come through, what have my dreams been telling me, what's happened when I've done oracle readings. So all of those things, have a look at them and say, what do I want to claim from that, and name. Naming, again, very important magic of Ansuz and of Saga and of Odin. So it's very, very available to you right now. And this journey from the primal elements of Feu, Uruz, Thurisaz, and the fact that he was on retreat makes this a particularly powerful annual cycle. Odin doesn't always go on retreat, at the same time. He goes on retreat frequently, but he spent a lot of time in Thurisaz this cycle. So there's a lot to recover, during this time. So use this time as he comes out. So as I've said, the new moon, I gave you the dates for the new moon, didn't I? Obviously, if I don't go through any of the dates, you can get these from Sunna as well. Let's just have a little check when Odin's Chariot's moving. So he's moving on the 29th of August is when he'll move from Thurisaz, which he's in at the beginning of the cycle, into Ansuz. So we'll see that in a moment. So we're working with starting positions at the moment. So he starts off in Thurisaz at the time of the new moon. So we're looking at all of these are in position for this new moon. And then we have Frigg in Uru. So she's a little bit behind. The sun's ahead. She's streaking ahead. Mercury, Odin, I should say, he's a little bit behind still. And Frigg's even further behind because she's just had a retreat period. She doesn't have them as frequently as Odin by any means. So she'll take a while before she takes the lead on this. So she's in Uru's real stability. So this may be experienced if you think about Frigg as being responsible for relationships. We can experience this as feeling a real sense of stability and solidity within our relationships if our relationships are already positive. If they are not, we might feel stuck. We might feel stuck within them. And the little Uru self, which is the aurochs, sort of horned aurochs, can get a bit frustrated with that. I want to move forward and I can't. So you might experience this time of Frigg and Uruz as being one of, I'm feeling great. Apologies if you can hardly see me. The sun's just sort of come blazing out. Just done something a bit funny to the screen. So the Uruz time with Frigg can be felt as a time of rooting and grounding. If you like gardening, it's a brilliant time for doing that, communing with your land. Feel into the relationships that feel like they are stable and secure to you, and be aware that the ones that might be feeling a little bit fractured, you might feel that desire to bring your Uruz aurochs self with his pointy horns to sort of break out of those a little bit. So just be aware of that, especially with Odin in Thurisaz and Sunna in Ansuz, means that your powers of self-expression are there quite strongly, but the drives can be quite difficult to manage. We might have a lot of emotions and passions behind that desire to break free. So one of the things to do is during this time is, if that is correct for you, is to notice and journal first on the things that you're getting frustrated with, and then decide how it is that you want to express that, rather than going straight into the horns down, charge. And then we have Tyr's Chariot. So Tyr's up here in Gibo. So Tyr, he's not speaking as strongly as me today. There's a sense of peace in many ways with Tyr and Gibo. Tyr is so attuned as the warrior self, the active self that notices what's wrong and wants to take action to correct it. There can be a real sense of balance during this time with our Gibo rune, which is the rune of the gift, and the rune of balance. What I'm not feeling, perhaps it's because he's sort of moved in and he's been in there for a little while, where we get frustrated because we realize that we've been bound to promises that we no longer wish to keep. It feels to me as if Tyr is offering us a place of peace with the promises and the oaths and the commitments that we've made in the past. It might be drawing on the Ud's Chariot and Ingu's energy and saying the path is set. There's nothing else that I can do about this. I need to stand in my own integrity. So it's a little bit a sense of find the peace by moving inwards and saying whatever else is happening in the external world, where is my sense of integrity right now and my sense of balance right now? And that's what Tyr seems to be offering through this time, rather than a desire for action, which is quite unusual for him. And that's coming through intuitively for me. It's not what I was expecting to come through from this reading. We need that sometimes, I think, within the readings, that balance, don't we? That if we're getting strong, like urges to move forward, which we're getting with the others, we need a balance here. And perhaps Tyr is offering that to us as well, because the passion from Frigg and from Odin is so strong. Tyr is often a balancing force. So his normal, natural proclivities to saying, right, let's look at your oaths and your promises and how you need to move forward in order to keep them. He's actually saying, you're fine right now. sometimes non-action is the correct course, or let this take its course and trust the process a little bit is what's coming through to me there. So those are our planetary movements, our starting points. So we've got all of the planets are now in place. And as I've mentioned, Odin's chariot will then move. So he will move into Ansuz on the 6th of September. And so he's really moving into his own power at that point. So that ability to express is coming through much more strongly when he moves. And you can see how the sun is still in Ansuz, Odin is in Ansuz. Now, I should mention here that we look at the new moon and the full moon with the lunar cycle. What actually happens is that the moon moves through all 24 of the runes through the course of a single lunar cycle. So we'd have to be moving our little moon button rapidly if we were going to be looking at that. But the new moon and the full moon to me represent really powerful, potent energies that act like forces, like tides that move through the cycle. So that Ansuz energy is still available to us from the new moon. What if you were doing your birth chart, then you would be looking at, okay, where was the moon on the day that I was born? But when we're working with runic astrology and the present energy of the moon, I tend to work more with what was happening at the new moon and the full moon. So we can still say, okay, that Ansuz energy was blessed by the presence of the moon during that period of time, even though Mani's chariots probably sort of moved on by a few days now, and it's probably sort of hanging around somewhere up here. You'll see it moves through, and not quite every day, but pretty similar. A slightly longer period than day is what he's actually doing. So that's how that works. So Odin's chariot has moved. And then we have Sunna's chariot move. So you can see that they're doing their little bit of a dance. So Odin's like, oh, I'm catching up with you. And then Sunna's like, no, I'm ahead now. I'm in Raidho. And it's that rhythm. And that is still very much in that place of Saga. But this is the time when action becomes more sensible, let's say. So yeah, I've mentioned that we might sort of run before we can walk a little bit, or allow ourselves to be ruled by our passions if we move too fast in that early part of the cycle. But when on the 30th of August, because they're actually, okay, now is the time when right action becomes available to us in a stronger way. So we've got that rhythm to us. And you remember I talked about the medicine of a rune being more available when the sun moves into that rune. So the medicine of Raidho, the medicine of ritual and rhythm become very strongly available to us during that time. Oh yes, that's helpful to me. So it becomes more possible for us to take direct action for oaths, promises, commitments, new contracts, those sorts of things after the 30th of August than in that first week of the new cycle at this time. On the 31st of August, we have our first quarters. We're through our first week. So we're moving into this next week now. And so again, you can see that Frigg now, she's moving up. She's like, right, I'm moving out of Uruz, I'm moving into Thurisaz. And that's on the 1st of September. And so Odin has already had his time in Thurisaz. And now Frigg is having her time in Thurisaz. Bearing in mind that this is a rune of relationships, this can bring up in a more intense way feelings of deep love, passion, connection, protective energies towards those people that we love, because it says it's a heart rune. But when we are being threatened, when things are not going the way that we want them to, that love that we want to give out can become fear that we will lose the love, or anger that somebody is violating our boundaries, our values. They've stepped across a line and they're not respecting us or showing love to us. And so we can experience that as anger. So it is where the Ansuz rune gives us connection to self-expression and is a more mind rune. Thurisaz is a heart rune. So it's really fascinating that these two runes are so close together, and they really promote, when we work with the runes, that connection between the heart and the head. And Frigg is bringing that heart-centered energy to our relationships during this period of time. So we can expect to feel a much stronger connection to what's important to us, where our passions are through this period of time. So don't be fazed if that comes up. And perhaps also recognizing, if you're able to, that other people will be experiencing that as well. So wonderful for positive relationships, also wonderful for bringing out some of the challenge parts of relationships that we might want to work our way through a little bit. Okay, so that's Frigg's Chariot and Thurisaz, and we're going to keep on with that rhythm there. So Odin, now he moves on as well. It's like Sunna, she's racing ahead in Raidho, I'm coming after her. So these planets then begin to bring all of their weight and their force to the Raidho rune. So we have the energy of Raidho becomes stronger and stronger. You can think about Sunna's chariot as drawing out the essential essence of the rune. So the essential essence of Raidho comes out when Sunna is in Raidho. We are able to access the healing energies, the energies towards wholeness that Raidho brings us. When other planets move in, they bring their agenda, their directing force to that. So Odin will be saying, okay, how do we work with that rhythm and with that ritual to create something for the long term, to bring new ideas through, to turn an idea into something that we can manifest. Again, always looking forward to the next rune in the cycle. So Raidho helps us to then move into our Kenaz energy of creativity with the hands. What patterns, what rituals, what habits do I need to put in place in order to be productive and creative and fruitful? So we can feel that sense of action becoming available and desirable for us as well during this period of time. So you might feel not itchy feet necessarily, could be itchy feet if it feels like I need to go somewhere in order to do something. It's also like hands wanting to take action. So you might feel that, oh, I just need to move my body somehow. During this period of time, if you feel a sense of frustration and you're like, I don't know how to get into movement about something, but just move. You know, I need to get up and walk around or do something that moves you out of the state of stuckness into the state of movement, so that you can then ask yourself, what energy does the intention or the idea or the dream that has been like forming through and has been coming through this whole period of Thurisaz, like Ansuz, and has been expressed? How do I start to bring momentum to that? What energy do I need to be in order to bring that through? So that's Sunna and Odin in Raidho together. Okay. And then we've already mentioned the retreat. This is when Wood is going into retreat. So there might be that little bit of a sense of we can't fully grasp the whys of world events. Some people are having a really, really good attempt at it, but it can feel even harder to connect our individual actions to the bigger picture of the world. And in some ways, it's saying during this time of retreat, the important thing is to keep going, even if we might experience a loss of a wider sense of purpose or a little bit of disconnection from faith. It's sort of saying keep going anyway. Use this sense of rhythm and this sense of self-expression. And this is why doing your writing and your self-expression before the 6th of September is so important, because it will help to sustain you during times when you're like, sorry, I've totally forgotten why it is that I was doing this. You know, then you can look back and you can go, okay, so this is why I was doing this. So you're leaving yourself a little bit of a legacy for when we get into the period of doubt that Ud's chariot can bring us. And then we move to our full moon. So we have our full moon in Teiwaz. So by this point, Mani's chariot has done his sort of half circle all the way round. He's now in Teiwaz, this full moon energy of Teiwaz, which again, maybe this is why Tyr's chariot was so happy, because Teiwaz is Tyr's rune. It is a rune of truth and victory. I feel a real sense. It's interesting because Teiwaz is a rune of action, like taking action and moving forward, but I'm still feeling a sense of peace and poise. It's almost like Tyr is reminding us that before you throw the spear, before you let the arrow, before you move the blade, or whatever it is that you're doing, you take that moment to make sure it's in alignment. And this full moon is the potency that really lends itself to bringing into fruition your hopes and dreams moving forward. So you want to think about the full moon as being the stepping off point that you then take action. So again, this is why I use that Raidho energy to start to think about what are the steps, what are the practical steps that I need to do to move forward. And the full moon in Teiwaz is not a time for thinking about things and you know, sort of pondering and stepping back. It's a time for saying, I'm intention setting, really strong intention setting. So the new moon in Ansuz offers us an opportunity for questioning and exploration. The full moon in Teiwaz is a time for setting our intention and then moving forward from that. No, very powerful 2 rune cycle for us to have if we're able to work with those 2 energies in that way. Okay. So after that point, Tyr's chariot moves from Gibo into Runyo. So it's the rune of joy and kith and kin and happiness. And you know what is he is almost a little bit uncomfortable in this rune because he's used to the hard road, you know. He's always the one who says, oh, I'll do the difficult thing, you know, whatever it is. And it's almost saying, take time to recognize the pleasure and the joy in the process of doing. There will be some things that you do and you set your full heart to it and your full sails going, and they fail. You know, that doesn't mean that you didn't reap from it. It doesn't mean that you didn't receive anything from it. The failure might be that the intention that you set around it wasn't the thing that then manifested, but you will still have received things through the process. And it might be that there are other things that you need to receive that you are unaware of, remembering that Ud's chariot is on retreat, and therefore we can't always tie our actions to the exact bigger picture that we're aiming for. And Tyr reminds us at this point to smell the roses, really, sort of say, there was a period of time with the myth of Tyr and the Fenris wolf, if you know it, where he has to bind the Fenris wolf. And it's remembering the joy and the pleasure of the friendship that he had with the Fenris wolf and allowing the blessing of that to be received, and to say that the reason it's so sort of painful for Tyr to do that, quite literally, painful for Tyr to do this, and the reason that he steps forward and sacrifices his arm in the process of this binding is because his friendship to the Fenris wolf was sacred to him. So what made it sacred in the first place? So it's saying, do that. Make sure that you recognize the times of joy and you reap from them during that time. On the 13th of September, Frigg is going to move into Ansuz. Once again, she's catching up. She spends her time in Ansuz, and this is a time for expression. If there is ever a time to say, I love you, now is the time. I value you. Write to your loved ones. Send messages, even if you think, oh, I haven't spoken to them in ages. It's a really propitious time to be sending that and to have that received. It's part of saying that sometimes actions are very simple. It's the action of reaching out to somebody and saying, you mean a lot to me, or your friendship matters to me. I value you for this. Speak the things that are important to you. Be a speaker of truth. It ties in so beautifully with the Tyr in Wunyo that Frigg moves into the space of expression and communication from the space that is divine, the voice of truth there. So it's a really lovely combination during that period. So this is after the full moon that all of this becomes available to us. And on the 14th of December, Odin moves into Kenaz. So this is, as I've said, it's the rune of manifestation, of making with the hands, of creativity and transformation. Practical activities become available to us during this period of time, starting to move when Sunna's chariot moves here. We have the autumn equinox happens at this point, but Odin is ahead. And it's sort of talking about the way in which thought has to become action. So again, it's that if we've set those intentions in place, let's say we've said, I want to do a project of some description, and I put this is how I'm going to do it in place. It's then saying, and now do it, and working with the hands and looking out, if you're in the northern hemisphere, like looking out for that turning of the wheel, the sort of the beginnings of autumn, the balance time as well, and thinking about the way in which, because Kenaz is the rune of the torch, it's also the rune of the forge. It's very much about when you're in the space of creation, you're responsible for making sure that all of the different elements come in at the right time. So there's a balance there that Kenaz invites us into, which is important, bearing in mind what I've been speaking about with Tyr in Gibo and then Runyo. We can, during this period of time, when Odin moves into Kenaz in particular, become absorbed by the creative process, and we don't step back and breathe and look at, okay, no, what other elements need to be brought in right now. So there's a need for awareness so that we don't become consumed by our own creative projects at that point, because Odin brings such enthusiasm to what he's doing, and he's been like waiting for this for a long time. So there's a little bit of counsel there that's coming in from the full moon and from Tyr's chariot in Runic as well, is to still have those moments of stepping back during this time. So it's that balance between commitment to action and commitment to pleasure and to joy and to, as I said, like smelling the roses at times. So that's Odin's chariot and Kenaz. Then we have our waning moons. We move into the last quarter, and there's just one final movement in that final week of this quarter, which is that Sunna then moves into Kenaz, which is the beginning of her Kenaz journey. She takes 2 weeks in each of the runes, and the autumn equinox in the northern hemisphere is bang in the middle of a half month of Kenaz. So she joins Odin there, bringing that potency again to the Kenaz rune, allowing it some healing energies to come through. But as Odin moves in as well, those energies of expression. So Sunna, when she comes in, brings more substance to the Kenaz energy, and in some way offers a more rounded, less all-consuming Kenaz energy. We can sometimes get there's a burnout possibility a little bit when Odin is in Kenaz on his own, and then when the sun comes in, that changes. It's a more grounded energy. The energy of the sun comes down and it offers us that energy which we then channel outside. So we're not using our own energy to express ourselves. We're not reliant entirely on ourselves within the whatever it is that we want to do for our creative project. So Sunna offers her energy then to our creative projects as well. So it's quite nice a little bit at the end there that we just get that one movement before we have the next new moon coming, and then our whole change as well quite rapidly soon. So I have quite a few rapid movements coming the week after when we move into the new lunar cycle. If you want to know more about runic astrology, more about birth runes, more about how to get access to your own personal birth runes or work with the runes at a deeper level, then visit www.maggierose.com. Have a wonderful, fabulous cycle. I can't wait to hear how it goes for you.